Hello and welcome to Filled with His Love. I heard a word this morning on NPR that caught my attention. The speaker said it was an archaic word, very old word that we don't use much anymore. But the moment I heard it, I thought, I think we need that word back. The word, Respair. Respair is what happens when despair is replaced with hope. Just saying it feels good, actually. Despair isn't just sadness. Despair is when you feel nothing will ever get better, when you lose hope. Despair is debilitating. It can be paralyzing. You don't feel like doing anything because you feel like whatever you do, you can't make things better. Not an emotion we seek for. So now comes this old, very old word, respair. It's not fake cheerfulness. It's not the, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of a word. It's different. It's when that slim ray of hope returns and you say to yourself, maybe things will get better. So let's dig into this word some more. Despair is the closing of the heart. Respair is when the heart opens again. So why did this word grab me today? Because I think we need it more than ever. Not because I think everyone is suffering from deep despair, but let's face it, this is the age of anxiety. I've talked before on this podcast about how anxiety has become frighteningly common among the rising generation, but it affects people of all ages. People suffer from all types of personal setbacks, failures, depression, disappointments. Most don't suffer from huge tragedies, but they do struggle with small discouragements, which often add up to a form of despair. And none of us wants to be around someone who is pulling us down with all kinds of doom. It can be contagious, this despair kind of thing. But so can respair be contagious. When people lose hope, they lose energy, creativity, and courage. When they respair, life starts moving again. Now think for a minute of Viktor Frankl, the Jewish survivor of a concentration camp during World War II. If anyone had a right to feel total despair, he did. He saw loved ones perish. He was separated from his wife after arriving in Auschwitz prison camp. He later learned she died in Bergen-Belsen prison camp. He was also separated from his mother, who was murdered at Auschwitz, almost certainly in the gas chambers. His father died in Theresienstadt, a town north of Prague, Czechoslovakia. His brother was also killed in Auschwitz. So did he despair? Did he give up hope? Miraculously, almost just totally incredibly, no, he did not. He said the people who survived weren't necessarily the strongest. Often they were the ones who still had meaning, he said. Some way they still found meaning in their lives even when everything around them was in a state of chaos and horror. Meaning is one of the engines of respair. When we feel our life has meaning, we lean into that meaning. We try to unpack it and let it give us life. I want to say that line again. I mean, it's important to me to kind of grab hold of this. Meaning is one of the engines of respair. When we feel our life has meaning, we lean into that meaning. We try to unpack it and let it give us life. I think of my own dad during World War II. He was not imprisoned in a concentration camp. He did not have to watch his compatriots taken to the gas chambers, but he did see a fellow soldier die on the battlefield right in front of him, just out of his reach. That scene tormented him for a long time. That scene took place in one of the fiercest battles of the war, the Battle of Okinawa. There were 49,000 U.S. casualties, including 12,000 killed in that battle. Let me just say that again. There were 49,000 U.S. casualties, including 12,000 U.S. soldiers killed in that battle. Over 100,000 Japanese military deaths, and 100 to 150,000 civilian deaths of the Japanese. We hear a lot about the D-Day battle in World War II. But think of this. On D-Day, there were 6,000 U.S. casualties and 2,500 deaths. Allied casualties on that day were about 10,000. It was a bloody day, but not nearly as bloody as the Battle of Okinawa. My dad suffered a back injury in that war that stayed with him the rest of his life. I even can remember him in his bedroom from time to time screaming out in pain because they just could not seem to cure his back injury. And because he had that injury in his back, he was sent back to the U.S. to receive needed medical treatment, which, in my view, didn't work very well. In one of his letters, he described how all of the soldiers on that ship that he was on going back to the U.S. for treatment, all those soldiers had some type of injury, very serious, many of them. He then said, in a kind of matter-of-fact way in one letter, some soldiers jump overboard because they can't face going home without a leg or an arm. For those soldiers, despair took over. They could not envision their future. They lost all hope. They definitely needed Respair. In Moses 7, Enoch was totally stunned to see God weep. He apparently assumed that God always had complete control of his emotions. But when God saw the misery of so many of his children, it caused tears to come to his eyes. He was sad. But sadness is not despair. You might think that God might have a right to experience despair given the fallen world that he must observe every day. But no, God never despairs. God never loses hope. He is, as the scriptures say, long-suffering. He patiently waits for us to find our purpose, to find meaning like Viktor Frankl did. Alma the Younger was racked with torment, but he cried out in mercy, and God responded. God had to be disappointed in Alma the Younger's earlier behavior as he tried to draw people away from the church. But again, God did not despair. God gave Alma the Younger Respair. He rebuilt Alma the Younger's faith that had waned. God can weep and still believe in his children. That's a form of Respair. Despair robs us of our agency. It makes us feel powerless, as if we cannot improve, as if we cannot solve the problem that looms before us. But Respair is agency returning, agency rekindled. It is hope and faith that spur us to action, even when we feel down, discouraged, or despondent. And where does that hope come from? We have hope through the atonement of Christ. When we begin to dwell on Christ's all-powerful arm, the power he has to help us act for ourselves and not be acted upon, despair is replaced by hope. Despair is a surrender of agency, but the Lord can reach out, as he did with Alma the Younger, and help us regain the power to act, to change, and to improve. If you're listening today and you feel despair, or if you know someone who is experiencing despair, I want you to know something. Despair is not your identity, and it is not the identity of someone you know. It's temporary fog, and fog always feels permanent when you're inside it. It's a strange thing. I remember one time being in a very deep fog, and we didn't seem to be able to get out of it. We kept turning different ways with our car, and the fog kept getting more dense and more dense all the time. It feels like it's never going to leave. But it does leave. Respair is real. Hope can return. The fog can lift. Light can return. Strength can return. And the moment you take one step toward God, one step toward goodness, one step toward action, something begins to shift. Respair takes over. It is not the absence of struggle. It is the return of hope in Christ for a brighter future. So my hope is that we can all experience a little Respair or help someone else who is suffering experience a little Respair this coming week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.